At Thanksgiving dinner, the turkey was carved, the wine was poured, and the illusion of harmony sat heavier on the table than the silverware. I was seated at the head of the table, not because I demanded it, because for 40 years that seat had belonged to me and Margaret. She had passed 3 years earlier, but tradition remained. My children filled the chairs around me, Daniel to my left, his wife Melissa beside him, Sarah across from me. Grandkids scattered along the sides, more interested in mashed potatoes than adult tension. It began quietly. Daniel leaned back in his chair and swirled his wine. "You know what worries me," he said, looking not at me but at the room. "Dad's been spending like this inheritance is already his to burn." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. Melissa nodded sympathetically. "We just want to make sure everything stays protected." "Protected? From whom?" I set my fork down carefully, not with force, with intention. "I see," I said calmly. The room waited. Daniel continued, encouraged by the silence. "You've been making withdrawals, transfers, big ones, and we don't know what's left." "What's left?" As if my life were an account waiting for liquidation. Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel." "No," he insisted. "We need to talk about this. It affects all of us." There it was, the word all. Inheritance, in his mind, had already become shared property. I folded my napkin and placed it beside my plate. "I didn't realize," I said quietly, "that I was spending someone else's money." "It's not like that," Melissa said quickly. "That's exactly what you said," I replied. Daniel's tone hardened. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly about what you're doing." The room cooled. Not dramatically, subtly. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. There was no rush, no shaking hands, just steady movement. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. The trust document. 22 years old. Signed by Margaret and me in the presence of an attorney who explained every clause twice. I placed it on the table between us. "If this is your inheritance," I said, "let's clarify ownership." Daniel's confidence flickered. "It's not about ownership," he replied. "It's about preservation." Preservation of what? What's supposed to be ours eventually? Eventually. Such a dangerous word. I slid the document closer to him. "The Margaret and Thomas Bennett Living Trust," I read calmly. "Assets remain under control of the surviving trustee until death. That trustee would be me." Silence. Sarah leaned forward to read the heading. Melissa stared at her plate. Daniel didn't reach for the paper. He didn't need to. He knew what it said. "You're being dramatic," he muttered. "No," I said. "I'm being precise." Precision unsettles people who rely on implication. "For 22 years," I continued, "this trust has governed our assets. Property, investments, savings accounts. Everything is structured. Nothing is floating in ambiguity." "But you've been withdrawing money," Daniel insisted. "Yes." "For what?" "For living." The grandkids looked confused. "Dad," Sarah said gently, "maybe we should talk about this privately." "Why?" I asked. "The claim was made publicly." Daniel flushed. "That's not what I meant." "You said I was spending your inheritance," I replied evenly, "in front of this family." He exhaled sharply. "It was just a figure of speech." "No," I said, "it was an assumption." Assumptions are seeds. If not corrected, they grow roots. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse him of greed. I did not mention the recent inquiries he'd made to my financial advisor without my knowledge. I simply let the document rest on the table. Authority does not need volume. "Are you saying we don't have a stake in this?" Melissa asked. "I'm saying you have an expectation," I replied. A stake implies ownership. Daniel leaned forward now. We're just worried you're not thinking about the future. I am the future, I said quietly. That line hung in the air longer than I expected, because it carried weight. Inheritance is a conversation about someone else's absence. I was still present. Sarah finally spoke. Daniel, this feels premature. He looked at her sharply. You think I'm wrong. I think Dad's still here. Exactly. That Thanksgiving did not end with shouting. It ended with quiet discomfort. The turkey was carved. Dessert was served. But the illusion of shared entitlement had cracked. After dinner, Daniel approached me in the kitchen. You embarrassed me, he said. I corrected you. You could have waited. You didn't. He ran a hand through his hair. I just want transparency. So do I. Then show me the accounts. I will, I replied, with an attorney present. He stared at me. You don't trust me. I trust documentation. Trust without verification invites misunderstanding. He left shortly after. Melissa barely made eye contact. Sarah hugged me longer than usual. Are you okay? She whispered. I'm 71, I replied, not confused. She smiled faintly. When the house emptied and the dishes were stacked, I sat alone at the table. The trust document remained where I had placed it. It had always been there, just not visible. Visibility changes narratives. Over the following weeks, I noticed subtle shifts. Daniel began asking indirect questions. How are your investments doing? Fine. Are you considering downsizing? No. Have you thought about simplifying the trust? No. Each question carried the same undercurrent, control masked as care. He even contacted my financial advisor. The advisor informed me immediately. Your son inquired about asset structure, he said. Did you disclose anything? Absolutely not. Good. Concern often escalates into oversight when not confronted early. I scheduled a meeting with my attorney. She reviewed the trust carefully. Your structure is solid, she said. No amendments, no vulnerabilities. Could someone challenge it? They could attempt to, she replied. But without medical evidence of incapacity, it would fail. There it was again. The unspoken strategy. If I appeared confused, the claim could gain traction. Narratives precede legal maneuvers. At Christmas dinner, Daniel was quieter. He didn't repeat the inheritance line. But the tension lingered. He asked, have you updated your beneficiary designations? Yes. With whom? My attorney. Silence. He was fishing for information. Information becomes leverage when misused. In January, I began organizing my records more meticulously. Every account statement, every property record, every deed copy. Not because I feared collapse, because I understood perception. If someone wants to paint you as unstable, you must be prepared to prove stability. That requires documentation, not defensiveness. Daniel eventually asked directly, why are you being so guarded? I'm being structured. You think I'm trying to take something. I think you're confused about what belongs to you. That ended the conversation. For a while. Because entitlement does not disappear immediately. It retreats, and then it reappears disguised. But that Thanksgiving dinner marked the beginning of clarity. Not confrontation. Clarity. And clarity, once established, is difficult to undo. The trust document had not changed. The assets had not changed. The only thing that shifted was assumption. And when assumption collapses, relationships must rebuild on truth. That rebuilding takes time. It takes humility. And it takes acknowledgement. Daniel was not there yet. But the illusion that I was spending, his inheritance, had ended. Not because I argued louder. Because I showed the paper. And paper, unlike pride, does not lie. That was the first lesson. The second was harder. Because what came next would not happen at a holiday table. It would happen quietly, behind closed doors. And it would test whether Daniel's concern was about preservation or possession. The real test didn't come at another dinner. It came on a Tuesday afternoon when my financial advisor called. "Tom," he said carefully, "your son reached out again." "For what purpose?" He asked whether there were any mechanisms for asset protection in cases of cognitive decline. There it was. He had moved from inheritance talk to incapacity talk. "And what did you tell him?" I asked. "That I could not discuss anything without your authorization." "Good. But," he added, "it may be wise to tighten communication channels." After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at the trust document again. The language was clear. Margaret and I had structured it intentionally. Assets remained under control of the surviving trustee. That was me. Upon my death, distribution would follow predefined allocations. There was no ambiguity. But legal structure means little if perception shifts. And perception can be manipulated. That evening, Daniel called. "We need to talk," he said. "We always need to talk," I replied. "This isn't funny." Neither was Thanksgiving. Silence. "I'm worried about you," he continued. "About what?" "You've been isolating yourself." "I live alone. That's not isolation. You're not as sharp as you used to be." "And you are." "That's not what I meant." "What did you mean?" He hesitated. "I think we should have you evaluated." There it was. Not inheritance. Not preservation. Capacity. "You think I'm declining?" I asked calmly. "I think we need clarity." Clarity already exists. Not medically. I haven't missed a payment. I haven't misplaced an account. I haven't shown signs of impairment. You forget things. So do you. That's not the same. You're right, I said. It's not. He exhaled sharply. I'm trying to protect you. No, I replied quietly. You're trying to protect what you believe is yours. The line landed. He didn't deny it. That was telling. 2 weeks later, Sarah called. Daniel told me he's considering guardianship. The word felt clinical. Cold. On what grounds? I asked. He says you're making impulsive withdrawals. I paid property taxes and donated to the Veterans Fund. He thinks it's excessive. Excessive. A 71-year-old man donating to causes he believes in. That's not incapacity, I said. I know. But he's convincing, she admitted. Convincing narratives are dangerous when left unchecked. The following Monday, I scheduled a full cognitive evaluation on my own. Not because I doubted myself. Because I understood documentation. The neurologist administered memory recall tests, reasoning assessments, financial judgment scenarios. How would you allocate risk across asset classes? He asked. Based on age-adjusted time horizon and tax exposure, I replied. He nodded. Any disorientation episodes? No. Difficulty with calculations? No. The evaluation lasted 3 hours. The report was concise. No signs of cognitive impairment, financial reasoning intact, executive function strong. I sent a copy to Daniel. He did not respond for 3 days. When he finally called, his tone was different. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? Because you were building a narrative. I was asking questions. You were planting doubt. Silence. I just want to make sure things don't spiral, he said. Spiral into what? You spending everything. I've built this structure for decades. That doesn't mean it can't change. You're right, I said. It can't change. That ended the call. But it didn't end the maneuvering. 2 weeks later, I received notice from my bank that someone had inquired about the existence of a durable power of attorney on file. I knew who that someone was. Daniel had begun exploring alternatives. Not through discussion. Through process. I drove to the bank the next morning. Sandra greeted me. Your son asked whether we had any existing POA documentation. We do not, I said. Correct. And if someone attempted to present one, we would require notarized documentation and your direct confirmation. Good. Tom, she added gently, are you comfortable? Yes. Then that's what matters. Comfort. Clarity. Documentation. 3 pillars. When I returned home, Daniel was waiting in my driveway. I just wanted to understand what protections exist, he said defensively. You wanted leverage. That's unfair. No, I replied calmly. It's accurate. You think I'm trying to take control. You're trying to anticipate control. Because you're not thinking about the future. I am the future, I repeated. He shook his head. You don't see what I see. And what is that? A man aging. And what do you see when you look at yourself? Silence. You see a father protecting assets, he insisted. I see a son anticipating inheritance. The words felt heavy, but they were necessary. You're making this adversarial, he said. No, I replied. I'm making it explicit. Clarity feels adversarial to those who prefer implication. The tension reached its peak in March. Daniel arrived unannounced again. He placed a folder on my kitchen table. What's this? I asked. Advanced directives, medical power of attorney. Just in case. Just in case of what? You decline suddenly. I have already structured medical directives with Elaine. Without telling me. I don't require permission. He stared at me. You don't trust your own son. I trust the law. He left angry. And for the first time, I felt something close to sadness rather than irritation. Because the issue was no longer about inheritance. It was about identity. Daniel had begun to see me as fragile. Not because I was. Because fragility justified control. That was the shift. That was the moment when they stopped being about Thanksgiving dinner and became about narrative dominance. But I had something Daniel underestimated. Time. I had documentation. I had structure. And I had patience. And patience, when combined with paper, is nearly impossible to defeat. The story was not over. But the direction had changed. Daniel thought this was about preservation. I knew it was about possession. And possession without consent is not care. It is claim. The question was no longer whether I was spending his inheritance. The question was whether he would accept that it was never his to claim in the first place. And that answer would not come through argument. It would come through evidence. Because when someone tries to define you as incapable, you do not shout. You demonstrate. Quietly. Consistently. Until doubt collapses under documentation. And I was just getting started. The petition arrived on a Thursday. It was delivered by a man in a grey jacket who asked for me by full name and handed me a thick envelope that required a signature. I knew what it was before I opened it. Petition for temporary guardianship. Filed by Daniel Bennett. Grounds: concern over cognitive decline and potential financial mismanagement. I read the first paragraph twice. It was written carefully, strategically, not emotional, clinical. He has demonstrated erratic withdrawal behavior and impaired judgment in financial matters. Erratic. Impaired. Judgment. Words chosen not for accuracy, but for persuasion. I set the envelope down on the kitchen counter and stood still for a long moment. This was no longer about Thanksgiving dinner. No longer about an argument over inheritance. This was an attempt to remove my authority entirely. I did not call Daniel. I called Elaine. Guardianship, she said calmly after reading the emailed copy. Yes. Do you have the cognitive evaluation report? Yes. Do you have consistent financial statements? Yes. Then this will fail. Her certainty steadied me. Why would he escalate this far? I asked. Because narratives require legal reinforcement when they lose social traction, she replied. That was it. When relatives stopped believing I was confused, Daniel needed institutional validation. Guardianship would provide it. If granted. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, Daniel avoided direct contact. Sarah called instead. He says you're being reckless, she told me. Reckless how? He mentioned donations, property tax prepayments, rebalancing. Those are structured decisions. I know. But he's framing them as impulsive. Perception is malleable when words are selective. I gathered everything. Every bank statement from the past 5 years. Every brokerage report. Every property deed. The cognitive evaluation. The trust document. The donation receipts. The structured tax plan. I organized them in chronological order. Not defensively. Methodically. When someone challenges your capacity, your calm becomes your credibility. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Daniel sat at a table opposite me with his attorney. He did not look at me. The judge reviewed the petition silently. Mr. Bennett, she began, addressing Daniel, you are requesting temporary guardianship over your father's estate due to alleged cognitive decline. Yes, Your Honor. On what medical basis? Daniel hesitated. We've observed forgetfulness and impulsive spending. Do you have medical documentation? No. Mr. Thomas Bennett, she turned to me, have you undergone cognitive evaluation? Yes, Your Honor. Elaine handed the report forward. The judge read carefully. No signs of cognitive impairment, executive function intact, financial reasoning strong. She looked at Daniel again. Do you dispute this evaluation? Daniel swallowed. No. Then on what basis are you alleging incapacity? He searched for words. He's making large financial decisions without consulting us. The judge's expression did not change. He is not required to consult you. Silence. Guardianship is denied, she concluded. One sentence. Come. Final. The gavel did not slam dramatically. It tapped once. That was all. Outside the courtroom, Daniel attempted to speak. Dad. I raised my hand gently. You attempted to declare me legally incompetent, I said quietly. We are past casual conversation. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to control me. His attorney stood back awkwardly. You don't understand the pressure, Daniel insisted. I understand perfectly, I replied. You mistook concern for entitlement. He looked defeated. I didn't want to lose what you built. You don't lose something that isn't yours. That sentence landed harder than any accusation. We left separately. The following week, relatives began calling again. Not cautiously this time. Directly. I heard about court, my brother said. Yes. Daniel told everyone you were slipping. I'm not. I see that now. Narratives collapse quickly when contradicted by legal documentation. Sandra from the bank called. We received notice of the guardianship petition, she said. We've added a notation confirming its denial. Thank you. Your accounts remain fully under your authority. They always were. Yes, she agreed. Authority is not something you feel. It is something you prove. Daniel did not call for several days. When he finally appeared at my house, he looked smaller than before. I messed up, he said. Yes. I didn't think it would go that far. You filed it. I thought if a judge reviewed it, they'd see what I see. And what do you see? He hesitated. A father aging. That is not incompetence. I was scared, he admitted. Of what? That you'd make decisions that left nothing. Nothing for whom? He looked down. For us. There it was again. Inheritance as entitlement. I built this over 40 years, I said, not as a future payout, as security. I know. Do you? He nodded slowly. I crossed a line. Yes. He stood there, unsure what came next. Forgiveness is not automatic after legal escalation. Trust is not restored by apology. Do you intend to appeal? I asked calmly. No. Do you intend to challenge the trust? No. Then what do you intend? He swallowed. To stop trying to control something I don't own. That was the first honest answer I had heard in months. Silence followed. Not tense. Just heavy. You humiliated me, I said quietly. I know. In front of family, in court. I know. And you nearly damaged something far more valuable than inheritance. What? Our relationship. He closed his eyes briefly. I don't know how to fix that. You start by acknowledging it publicly. The following Sunday, Daniel called a family meeting. Not at Thanksgiving. Not at Christmas. Just a plain Sunday afternoon. I was wrong, he said to everyone present. Dad is not confused. I let fear turn into control. No excuses. No qualifiers. That mattered. Sarah hugged me afterward. I'm sorry I believed it for even a second, she whispered. Belief spreads faster than correction. But correction, once spoken clearly, lasts longer. The guardianship petition was sealed. The trust remained intact. My authority was legally confirmed. But something else shifted that day. Daniel stopped seeing me as a resource and began seeing me as a person again. Not because I shouted, Not because I threatened, because documentation defeated assumption, and because the law does not respond to emotional narratives. It responds to evidence. The Thanksgiving accusation had been loud. The courtroom denial was quiet. But the quiet was stronger, because quiet backed by truth cannot be shaken. And the story was not over. It was just changing shape. From confrontation to accountability. The courtroom silence stayed with me longer than the Thanksgiving accusation ever had. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't explosive, it was controlled. That control mattered. Daniel's petition had not just questioned my judgment, it had questioned my identity. It had tried to redefine me as incapable. And once that kind of label is attempted, it cannot simply be ignored. But it can be corrected. In the weeks after the hearing, Daniel kept his distance. Not hostile, not confrontational, just quiet. Silence this time did not feel manipulative. It felt reflective. He came by one afternoon, in early spring, without calling ahead. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing quarterly investment summaries. "Can we talk?" he asked. "We always could," I replied. He stepped inside and stood near the doorway, uncertain. "I didn't think it would go that far," he said again. "It did. I thought the judge would see. I was just trying to protect things." "You weren't protecting things," I said calmly. "You were protecting fear." He didn't argue. "I was afraid," he admitted. "After Mom passed, you threw yourself into managing everything alone. I felt unnecessary." That word was new. Unnecessary. "So you tried to make yourself essential," I said. He nodded slowly. "I thought if I was managing the trust, I'd be contributing. By removing me. I didn't think of it that way." That was the effect. He looked down. "I didn't see how it felt from your side." "Then look." He raised his eyes. "When you called me incompetent," I said quietly, "you weren't protecting inheritance. You were accelerating absence." That landed. Inheritance implies death. Guardianship implies incapacity. Both remove the present. "I don't want you gone," he said quickly. "I'm not." "I know." Silence again, but softer this time. "I'll never challenge it again," he said. "The trust. You." That mattered more. Over the next month, something subtle shifted. Daniel stopped referring to the assets as ours someday. He stopped asking speculative questions about timelines. He began asking about my plans instead. "What are you thinking of doing next year?" "I might renovate the kitchen." "Do you need help?" "Yes, but not control." He smiled faintly. That smile wasn't defensive. It was understanding. Sarah visited more often as well. I didn't realize how persuasive he sounded, she admitted one afternoon over coffee. "Narratives are powerful when delivered confidently," I replied. "I should have asked you directly." "You're asking now." She nodded. "I won't make that mistake again." Mistakes corrected are lessons earned. Summer arrived with quieter family gatherings. No tension, no whispers, no subtle glances. At the 4th of July barbecue, Daniel spoke differently. When someone joked about inheritance taxes, he shook his head. "Dad's plans are structured," he said. He built everything intentionally." That word again. Built. Not inherited. Not stumbled into. Built. After everyone left that evening, I sat alone on the porch. Margaret would have handled this differently. She would have spoken louder. She would have confronted more sharply. I chose documentation. Documentation does not escalate. It stabilizes. In August, I made one final decision. I met with Elaine and amended the trust. Not to remove Daniel, not to punish, but to clarify succession. A co-trustee structure was added upon my incapacity, requiring independent fiduciary oversight. Transparency protects relationships. When Daniel reviewed the amendment, he did not argue. "That's fair," he said. "Yes. It removes doubt. That's the point." He signed acknowledgement without hesitation. That signature meant more than the courtroom denial. It meant acceptance. In September, I slipped on wet leaves in the driveway. Nothing serious. A bruised hip and wounded pride. Daniel arrived within minutes after I called. Not with paperwork. Not with suggestions. With ice. He helped me sit down and stayed until I assured him I was fine. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." "You sure?" "Yes." That was protection, not possession. There is a difference. As autumn returned, so did Thanksgiving. This time, the table felt lighter. Daniel carved the turkey. I sat at the head of the table again. No one mentioned inheritance. No one mentioned confusion. After dinner, Daniel stood. "I owe everyone something," he said quietly. The room stilled. "I was wrong last year," he continued. "Dad isn't confused. I let fear and pride cloud my judgment." He didn't look at me for approval. He looked at the room. I tried to control something that wasn't mine. Silence followed, but not the heavy kind. The respectful kind. He sat down. I nodded once. No speech. No lecture. Because accountability spoken publicly is stronger than defense shouted privately. Later that night, Emily pulled me aside. "You didn't even say anything," she whispered. "I didn't need to. You won." "This wasn't about winning," I replied. "It was about clarity." She smiled. "I'm glad you didn't shout." "So am I." She looked thoughtful. "I learned something." "What?" "Just because someone sounds confident doesn't mean they're right. That's a useful lesson. And just because someone is older doesn't mean they're confused. That's an even better one." As the evening ended and the house grew quiet, I reflected on what had changed. The trust document had always been valid. The accounts had always been stable. The only unstable element had been assumption. Daniel assumed ownership. He assumed decline. He assumed urgency. But assumption collapses under evidence. And evidence, when presented calmly, reshapes relationships. I do not resent him. Resentment requires sustained anger. What I feel instead is vigilance. Boundaries do not exist because people are bad. They exist because people are human. Fear can turn love into control. Pride can turn concern into accusation. But humility can reverse it. When Daniel filed that petition, he crossed a line. When he withdrew it in spirit and accepted structure, he stepped back across. Trust does not reset instantly. It rebuilds gradually. But it rebuilds. That is the quiet part no one talks about. Vindication isn't dramatic. It's procedural. It's signing documents. It's presenting reports. It's allowing a judge to read facts. It's letting paper do what emotion cannot. If you ever find yourself accused of confusion when you are simply careful, remember this. Precision is not paranoia. Structure is not rigidity. And authority, earned over decades, does not dissolve because someone feels anxious about the future. Set down the fork. Reach for the document. Let the silence work. Because truth, when documented, does not need to shout. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do at a table full of doubt is simply show the paper. That Thanksgiving began with accusation. It ended a year later with acknowledgement. Not because I fought harder, but because I stayed steady. And steady wins longer than loud ever does. The trust remains. The family remains. And clarity remains. That is enough.